see my friends. I wanna walk the street again.
Dr. Rubinstein, they're all yours.
Hey, how are you guys? Actually, I'm inside a vehicle that is traveling from LA to Phoenix right now. Can you believe that? Great connectivity, I guess. Hey, well, I do have 3 PhDs actually, and as a profession, my profession was a medical doctor, but my passion is education. And that's the reason why I actually enjoy very much what I'm doing. Furthermore, I was also the vice president of AC Diesel here in the United States until unfortunately I got a little ill and I couldn't proceed any further. Are you guys hearing okay? Yeah, okay, good. Glad to hear that. Well, thank you for everything. Thank you for coming. And I will do my very best to be of assistance to you today, guys. One of the most neglected areas when it comes to education is assessment. How many of you guys actually agree with that? Would you please let us know now? And if someone can read the answers for me, please.
A whole bunch of I do's. And yes, they're also hearing you very well. They are also letting you know in the chat box. And some people say it's been challenging, agreed, assessment and feedback. Lots of yeses and I do.
Yeah. Actually, the most difficult thing for any teacher or educator to undergo is the ability to develop proper assessment tools. So what we go for is what they call a high stakes assessments, such as, for instance, when you study English, you go for TOEFL and Trinity and some other type of language assessments. But what's the purpose of assessment? What do you guys think is the purpose for assessment? Would you mind answering that question?
So people can write, what's the purpose of assessments, right? Depending on the reason for assessment, another person said check for understanding, get to know what was incorporated, to see where students are at on their process, on their learning process, checking where we are on the right track, to evaluate if the students are learning. Those are some of the answers.
Thank you. When I went to school to get my doctorate in education, assessment, actually I had to get 9 full credits when it comes to assessment. From 60 credit hours, 9 of them were actually devoted to assessment. Why? Because assessment is key. Imagine a table with only 2 legs. It will not stand on itself. And assessment is the main tool that sustains education as one. With that being said, I would like to share with you a PowerPoint presentation that I created, but please feel free to interject, comment, or do whatever you feel like if you have any doubts. Is that all right with you guys? Thank you. So let's go ahead and do that. I will try to share this screen. I'm not really. Let me see, share screen. Here, I will share this screen. If you pay attention, I will actually, I chose this image because assessment is in fact the main piece of the whole puzzle when it comes to education. So what do I do? Why do I say that? For the following reasons. Well, the main purpose of evaluation or assessment is to improve the student learning, okay? Improve student learning. You know what? I spent a whole year in Paraguay, and I spoke with many so-called, I have to use the word so-called. If I offend anyone, please um, let me know. So-called experts, evaluadores and evaluadoras, and their goal was just to give the student a number, a grade, to see who passes, who moves on, and who stays behind. But the main goal of assessment is actually to check if the students are actually learning. There are other purposes. So what do we do with, I'm sorry, what can teachers do with assessments? There are three things, as you can see, that teachers can actually do with assessment. You can decide whether to reteach, to move on, or to change teaching strategies. And I want you to be honest with me. How many of you use an assessment tool to do these three things, or one of these three things? Would you please answer and share with me? We have a minute.
Well, three, I do remedial teaching. I try to change strategies. More, I do it. I do. And let's see what else we have. Another, I do. I try to do it. I try to change strategies. Or reteach or move on. Change strategies. I do it for sure. I try to do it, especially to know how to move on. I had to learn to see assessment as a tool in order to know how students are doing with the learning process.
Good.
Those are some of the answers.
Thank you. Fantastic. How many of you actually use an assessment to reteach a particular subject? This is what I observe in Paraguay. Students will take a test and teachers will grade them. And then with very seldom, rarely, people gave feedback to the students. Because we use, I will tell you the main goal of assessment is, if your student fails, might be your student, might. However, most certainly, it is you who's failing your student. Listen to what I'm saying. You guys can get out of the meeting now if you hate me already. But the reason why students fail, because I'm also a doctor in psychology and all doctor in education, is that the fact that we are failing the students. How many of us actually stopped and offered to reteach a particular lesson? Not just remedial, but to reteach the whole lesson, the whole class. How many of you guys, after reteaching the same subject or same topic a few times, 2-3 times, decided to change strategies? Not with one student, but with the whole class. So think about that, please. I'm not trying to judge anyone or saying that someone's doing better than others. I'm just saying that the main goal of a assessment is to help students improve their learning. So you can do three things with an assessment: is to reteach, to move on, or to change your teaching strategies. So what do assessments do? Well, unfortunately, there's a mistake right there. And determine whether students are learning or not. It says note, it should say no. And its primary goal is to measure learning so teachers can do something about it. How many of us actually, after a test where, I don't know, 20 or 30% of our students fail, sat down and did some introspection and decided that, well, obviously I'm doing something wrong. I need to change my strategies. The goal of assessment was never meant to be give a grade. Do you understand that? The main goal, the original goal of assessment was never meant to give a grade. However, reality then shocks us by saying, well, you have to give the students a grade. Why? Because the Ministerio de Educación requires it, or because the parents want to know. But actually, it's not the main goal of assessment. The main goal of assessment is to determine how much my student is learning and why they're not learning certain things and what can I do to make sure that they learn. Hopefully this point makes sense to you. So what else assessments are good for? This is fundamental that you understand. To identify deficits. First in the classroom and second in school. First in the classroom and second in the school. What is a deficit? How many of you guys, what do you guys understand by deficit?
People are writing. I'd like to share some of the previous comments, if you allow
Please,
me.
please.
One of the participants shared a phrase or something that students would normally very commonly say. For instance, teacher, why did I get a 1 and not a 5? For those of you who are not in Paraguay or not familiar with the Paraguayan grading system, we go from 1 to 5. 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. And they would ask, why did I get a 1 and not a 5? They don't ask or think why the point was wrong. Students don't want to fail. So there's also this attachment of, success and the number, right? Not necessarily learning. That's what I understand this person is saying. So another person said, if a student fails in a way, it's our fault. We did not do our best to help that student achieve one particular goal. If many students don't know, I stop and I reteach. That's another comment. The same thing in a different way because I have clearly failed. This is what one person said. If students are not learning, I reteach. I use formative assessment a lot. What my students know what my students know about something, to know how they learn and how to provide feedback. That will help learners to move forward. Also, when you were talking about grades being demanded either by schools, parents, or ministerios, it's what the authorities demand, and that's why we have to assign them, right? And another comment says that assessment is more general and involves more, not just testing.
Indeed, we create.
And now we have comments about what deficits are. Lack of school facilities. Deficits, something that is needed. Prior knowledge is something. Knowledge is also considered a deficit. What is not working is a deficit. What students lack. Those are some of the comments about your last question on what a deficit is.
From a medical perspective, a deficit is something that your body is missing. Your body is missing, and yet it is fundamental for you to have it. However, you don't have it. So it will eventually create further health problems if you don't address those deficits. Going back to the field of education, I will say this. You only accrue problems if you don't address educational deficits through evaluations, through assessments. You see, it's the snowballing effect. You know, the snowball starts little and it grows and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it becomes even deadly at the end. So I taught college level classes in Paraguay, and I had students that couldn't even read Spanish. So, and then I wonder, and I asked myself, why is that these students cannot read Spanish and yet they attend an English spoken class? Why they didn't do anything or something way before? And that's a good question. So there is a big deficit now when it comes to education, and evaluation or assessments are the main tool that we can use to prove our points as educators. So something really good that Paraguay is doing, fantastic. In the US, very few schools are taking this, is that Paraguay has an education that aims to be competency-based education, CBE, competency-based education. So, as how many of you guys are regular teachers? How many of you guys know what competencias or competencies are? Would you mind sharing with me? In the meantime, Elena, did you share with them that educational consulting services will give him a um, a certificate for attending this?
No, I haven't, but I was going to save that for the last part. But yes, we'll let everyone know. In the meantime, while people write what competency or what they understand or what they think they what they understand or on what competency based education is, Akiva is also going to share with us the another certificate for besides the certificate that we are going to give you at the end on a company that he is working for, and we really appreciate that. We have one of the answers says some competencies such as autonomy in their learning, collaborative work, critical thinking.
Wonderful. There are three type of things or components of competencies: skills, knowledge, and attitude. So I want to ask you a question. How many of you guys ever created an evaluation or assessment tool that actually checks for knowledge, skills, and attitude? Please share with me.
Another person says that a rubric that would include the things that you have just mentioned. I guess that would be not the three of them, actually, not very often, not always. I would like to, but it seems that not all of them, not always. It's time consuming. In the school I teach, we use rubrics that include the three aspects you are mentioning, and not all the three: competency-based at learning, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And not always, and rubrics are the words that are coming.
Yeah, rubrics, I understand that, but competency-based education and rubrics are like you call in Paraguay, uña and mugre, right? They go together unavoidably, cannot divide them, cannot separate them. They cannot get divorced. But I have another question now. When you give your students a multiple choice questions or yes or no answers, how that thing measures attitude or skill. Aren't we testing just for knowledge?
Because knowledge, it doesn't, and another person said never. The cooperative teaching method uses all three competencies. Um, Another person said memory. That is too specific. So mainly, yes, knowledge. It seems that's the agreement.
Unfortunately. But most of the exams or assessment tools that I was able to see, experience, and even check when I was there were did not measure any of those except knowledge. So even though the Ministerio says that we should have a competency-based education, we're not evaluating according to that particular goal or desire. Please don't call Ministro Peta and tell him that I'm chewing him out. So I want to share something with you. In the United States, we have what they call Carnegie units. How many of you guys know what Carnegie units are? Yes,
That
no,
most of us don't know what Carnegie units are.
fine. You lose nothing by ignoring it, actually. It's fantastic. Okay, in Andrew Carnegie, which is, I don't know if you guys ever been to New York, there's a Carnegie Hall there. He was one of the richest men on earth. Andrew Carnegie noticed in 1893 that in Arizona, I'm sorry, even though we were not a state, we were just territory until 1912. But the students will go to school for a certain amount of hours and and then just receive a high school diploma. Or as students in Pennsylvania will go for a different amount of hours and then will receive a diploma. So there was no uniformity as to how many hours a student has to sit in one class to actually graduate. So in 1906, he came up with this called Carnegie Unit. And I will explain a little bit further on that. So how do we use these Carnegie units? First, the more Carnegie units you have, you will dictate what kind of college you can go to, the type of student loans that you can get, and even in which college teams you can play. Unbelievable, but it's true. So a Carnegie unit, I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me see if I can move this here. Did I move it properly?
Your screen, all right.
Okay. A Carnegie unit is 120 hours of contact between a given student and a teacher of a given subject. So for me to graduate from high school in the United States, I need 20 Carnegie units. So if I need 20 Carnegie units, how many hours do I need to spend in a high school from 9th grade to 12th in order for me to get my high school diploma? Anyone has a calculator? Because I don't.
400, one person said.
Is it 440?
2,400.
2,400 hours? Excellent. Let's say it's 2,400 hours. So for me to get, this is gonna sound ridiculous. For me to get a credit, I have to be at least 120 hours with my butt glued to the chair in math class or algebra or Spanish or English. Then I get my one Carnegie unit. This is the really sad part. It doesn't matter how much a student learns for real life situations, but how much a student actually sees in a particular subject. Therefore, for those of us in the United States, that how many credit hours do you have? Learning is actually immaterial. And that's the system that we have in the United States. Can you believe that? For instance, when I got my licenciatura, I needed 128 credit hours. So that was 4.5 years of college, sitting in my butt into a class where actually I learned very, very little. So when I went to China to teach at the Beijing University, I found out that I couldn't actually fail students. And the reason why I couldn't fail students was because as long as they will sit in class, they will pass. Unbelievable, but it's actually true. This is what the CBE or competency-based education truly is. And tell me, please, number one, you go at your own pace. I have a question. Is this true in Paraguay? Only on honest answers. Don't lie to me.
Lots of no's coming in.
I have another question. Will the MEC, Ministerio de Educación, allow you as a teacher to go on your own pace?
That the no's are coming in now. They are no as well for the second, not in Uruguay as well. Not really. The MEC does not allow it. There's a yearly program that you have to follow.
So in Peru, in Panama?
Nope, in Argentina as well.
No, in Argentina. Will they actually let you go at your own pace?
Not really in Panama, not really in Argentina, in Uruguay either. So I think it's a no for the region or continent, actually.
Welcome to the club. There are very few schools in the US that actually apply CVE. So we're equal there. So the Carnegie units are the great equalizers of mediocrity. It doesn't really, for a CVE environment, it doesn't really matter how long it takes for you to learn. As long as you learn. Why the MEC or Ministerio de Educación says that the education in Paraguay is competency-based, and yet they give you a calendar that you have to follow through strictly or get punished. That's a great question. It doesn't really matter how long it takes for you to learn, as long as you learn. Is this a fact in your classroom? Is this a fact? No? Yes?
It seems that it should be, but it's not, and not everybody thinks like that. That's true. Like what you're, and there in time, and there is a time constraint as well.
The point is that for competency-based education, there shouldn't be no time constraint. The only thing that matters is that you learn what you need to know. Then we have two questions. What do you need to know or learn to fit in real life situations? And the other question is, how do you determine that? So what we're doing here in the US is this. We're asking doctors, what they expect from a new doctor when they come and work for them. Sort of a reverse engineering. And from there on, we determine the type of skills they need and the type of knowledge they need and the type of attitude that they need, and create lessons and content, curriculum based on those three needs. Let me tell you one thing. When you go to med school, yeah, and entrance examination, that's what they call it, in Paraguay, in hopefully in Argentina, Uruguay. Well, if you're gonna become a lawyer, why do you need to know about science? Or if you're going to become a medical doctor, why do you need to know about algebra? Chemistry, I will understand, but algebra? So what are you trying to become? And what are your students trying to become? And are you creating or developing content based on the needs, the real life needs of your students? How many of you guys develop your own content? And how many of you guys actually use pre-regurgitated content? Do you understand? Hopefully, more pre-regurgitated is not that bad for you.
Mix of both depending on learners' needs. This is one of the comments.
How many of you guys, how many of the schools that you
Yes.
guys work for allow you to create your own lesson content? If the school doesn't allow you to create your lesson content, or the system doesn't allow you to create your lesson content, it is not competency based. Hopefully that makes sense. So what is perspective of you in a CVE? Learning will become a variable of time and space, and you have to shift your focus from time allotment to demonstration of competencies. So when you create your assessment tool, it should not be based on, okay, I have 3 weeks to teach subject pronouns. Well, and then after you'll have to know, but actually the check on your eval is skills, knowledge, and attitude. You shouldn't be pressured into finishing a program, but into making sure that your students actually are learning, but learning for real life. Hopefully, once again, this actually makes sense. So when you make your lesson planning should not be so strict that you have to finish a certain amount of content within a specific period of time. Your focus will change from specific timing to how much my students can actually demonstrate. So how do students master competency? First, students must know what their competencies, and second, your students must know how master competencies look like by providing explicit competencies or examples. You want your students to demonstrate how to use the subject pronouns, but they have to demonstrate it by their own, not just because you give them a piece of paper. So the focus is on how much the students can actually demonstrate the knowledge they're acquiring. So what is assessment? What's this assessment type in CVE? It's an ongoing process. It's not a summative event. So what happens is, first, the student halts. Okay, you have to repeat this year. Second, the rest of the class moves on. But in a competency-based education environment, students are given more than one chance and more than one way to demonstrate competencies. I work for a high school in Paraguay, and I almost gave the evaluadora a heart attack. And I will tell you how. The first day of class, because they told me it was competency-based education, I told my students, well, this is what I expect you to know, and this is what I expect you to show me or demonstrate your knowledge by the end of this course, and I will give you freedom to choose how you want to be assessed. Oh my Lord. Yes, I'm the one to be blamed because the evaluadora went to the ER because she almost had a heart attack. I didn't know that was not allowed there. But how many of you guys will give your students the freedom to choose how they want to be eval? Is that even feasible?
One of our participants mentions that she gives her students options sometimes. If they are only if we're private tutors, they would have that liberty. But it is possible, and sometimes seems that are the recurrent answers.
It is possible, but how many of you guys will actually be allowed by MEC to do that? That's a good question. So
it seems that none of them have the possibility, apparently.
I'm truly sorry. Then I got bad news. It seems that Paraguay is not a competency-based education system now. What is CBE and authentic assessments are like this. Authentic assessment is the result of authentic learning. What is authentic? Authentic means that the knowledge that I get in class, I can use it in real life. Did that make sense? The knowledge that I get in class, I can use it in real life. What happens is that education around the world mostly is based on humanities. What is humanities? That you have to learn a language, Latin or whatever, any other language, and you have to know a little bit of science, a little bit of math, a little bit of this, a little bit of Monica in my life. No, just kidding. But when they get out of classroom, they have no use for what they have learned. Therefore, your assessment is not authentic. Therefore, your teaching is not authentic. Therefore, the lessons are not authentic. The main key fundamental question is, are you preparing your students for life outside of school? Are you preparing your students for life outside of school? How many of you guys remember that song sung by Cher? Do you believe in life after love? So my question now is, do your students use what they learn in class? How useful is the knowledge that you are imparting as a teacher? How authentic are your English lessons? Let me give you an example. In the US, if you're from Boston, you don't pronounce the R. What did you buy? I bought a car. You bought a car? No, a car. And they even get mad when you tell them that there's an R at the end of it. But then you come to the Southwest, where I live, and there is a lot of Hispanic Mexican influences. So we eat tortillas, but they actually is flat bread. We eat even gringos like me or some other people will go to a Mexican restaurant and eat salsa, picante, and we know those words, but then that's a reality here. But if you go to Florida, Florida is not a state. Florida belongs to the Cubans. Um, but eventually we'll give it back to Cuba. But the reality is also different there. So how much are you preparing your students for that reality? And are you assessing your students to face the real world? How to implement it? The key phrase I would like you to take home is paradigm shift. If you want true learning, then and you want true assessment, you have to change your mindset, and you have to believe and act as you are no longer a slave of time, but of performance. You are no longer a slave of time, but of performance. How do you measure performance? Please, can you answer that question for me? I know time is running out, but would you mind sharing with me, please? Let's say a driving test. Have you heard of the word expression driving test when you go to motor vehicle department to get your licencia de conducir, which actually here in the US you cannot buy, you have to take the test. And you go to the motor vehicle department and you have to take a car and you take a theoretical test, but then you have to get in the car and demonstrate that you actually know how to operate it. That is performance. Get behind the wheel and show me that you know how to drive. So my question now is, how many of your assessment tools that you use allow your students to get behind the wheel and show you that they know how to drive? Hopefully, I will be able to instill in you a sense of a need for change. And I'll want to give you, I left this thing open. Do you know why I left this page open? And I will finish with this. Because you should have the freedom to create your own tools. You should have the freedom to determine how you're going to demonstrate the knowledge, the skills that you need, the attitude that you change inside of you. That's the reason why I left this page blank. I'm praying that there is a change in your heart now towards learning and assessing If I did that, then I taught you something good. Because if there's something warm in your heart right now, then I taught you well, and there's a change in your attitude. And you increase your knowledge. Now go ahead and show me and demonstrate that you learned. And show me that your heart has changed. Thank you. Thank you very much.